My wife filed for divorce on Christmas morning and told everyone I ruined the holiday by refusing to pretend everything was fine in front of her family. I'm 35M and my wife Vanessa is 33F. 4 days ago, on Christmas morning, she handed me divorce papers before her family woke up and then expected me to spend the entire day pretending everything was normal. When I couldn't manage that, she told her family I'd ruined Christmas by being cold and distant. Now her entire family thinks I'm the problem, and I'm questioning whether I handled this wrong. For context, Vanessa and I have been married for 6.5 years. We got married in July 2018. For the first few years, things were genuinely good. We had normal relationship ups and downs, but nothing serious. We both work in finance, me as an analyst and her in wealth management. We bought a condo in downtown Chicago 3 years ago, traveled together, had shared friend groups. I thought we were building a solid life. About a year ago, things started shifting. Vanessa became more distant. She'd work late more often, spend weekends with her friends without inviting me. Conversations became surface level. When I tried to talk about it, she'd say she was just stressed with work or tired. I believed her at first, but the pattern continued. By this past spring, we were basically roommates. We'd have dinner together, maybe twice a week, barely talk beyond logistics. Intimacy was non-existent. I suggested marriage counseling in June. She initially resisted, so we didn't need it. We just needed to communicate better on our own. I pushed harder in August, and she finally agreed. We went to 3 sessions in September before she said she didn't think it was helping. The counselor had been trying to get us to talk about underlying issues, but Vanessa kept deflecting. She'd say things were fine. She just needed me to give her space. The counselor pointed out that we were both emotionally checked out in different ways. After the 3rd session, Vanessa said she was done with counseling. October and November were worse. We were living completely separate lives in the same space. I tried multiple times to have serious conversations about where we stood. Each time Vanessa would say she was figuring things out and I needed to be patient. I asked directly in mid-November if she wanted a divorce. She said no, she just needed time to sort through her feelings. 2 weeks ago, December 11th, Vanessa told me her family was coming to stay with us for Christmas. Her parents, her younger sister Caroline, and Caroline's fiancé, they'd be arriving December 23rd and staying through December 27th. I was surprised because we'd talked earlier in the fall about potentially spending Christmas separately given how strained things were. But she insisted her family was expecting to stay with us, and she couldn't back out now. I asked how she expected this to work, given the state of our marriage. She said we just have to make it work, that family was important to her, and she wasn't going to let our issues interfere with Christmas. I pointed out that pretending everything was fine for 5 days would be exhausting and probably make things worse. She said I was being dramatic. Her family arrived on the 23rd. I tried to be cordial and welcoming, but the tension between Vanessa and me was obvious to anyone paying attention. We barely spoke to each other except when necessary, slept in separate rooms, which I'm sure her family noticed. Christmas Eve was awkward. We did the usual activities, made dinner together, watched movies, but Vanessa and I could barely look at each other. Her mom pulled me aside at one point and asked if everything was okay. I said we were working through some things. She looked concerned but didn't push. Christmas morning, December 25th, I woke up around 7 a.m. Vanessa was already awake, sitting in our living room. Her family was still asleep. She had an envelope in her hand. She handed it to me and said we needed to talk. I opened it. Inside were divorce papers, already filled out. She'd filed them over a week ago, December 17th, before her family had even arrived. I sat there staring at the papers, trying to process what I was reading. I asked why she'd chosen Christmas morning to give these to me. She said she'd filed the previous week, but her lawyer had told her she needed to serve me within 10 days. She'd been trying to figure out how to handle the timing with her family here, but she'd run out of time. Legally, she had to serve me by December 27th. I asked why she'd invited her family to stay with us if she'd already filed for divorce. She said when she'd invited them in early December, she genuinely wanted one last normal Christmas with everyone together before everything changed. She thought maybe she could delay the legal process until after the holidays. But her lawyer had been clear about the timeline requirements. She said she needed me to keep it together for the day, that her family didn't need to know yet, that we could tell them after they left. She wanted to have Christmas, open presents, have the family dinner she planned, and deal with a divorce after. I felt like I'd been hit in the chest. She just handed me divorce papers and expected me to spend the day playing happy husband in front of her family. I told her I couldn't do that I wasn't going to pretend everything was fine when she just ended our marriage. She got defensive, said I was being selfish, that one day of pretending wasn't too much to ask, that her family had traveled to be here and she didn't want to ruin their holiday. I said she'd already ruined the holiday by serving me divorce papers on Christmas. We argued in hushed voices for about 20 minutes. She kept insisting I could pull it together for a few hours, that we didn't have to be affectionate, just civil. I said I didn't think I could manage even that. Her family started waking up around 8 a.m. We had to stop the conversation. I went to our bedroom and stayed there for a while, trying to figure out what to do. I could hear everyone in the living room, starting to make breakfast, talking, and laughing. I came out around 9 a.m. because staying in the bedroom indefinitely wasn't an option. Everyone was gathered in the kitchen. Vanessa shot me a look that clearly meant act normal. I tried, I really did, but I was completely numb. We opened presents. I sat on the couch holding coffee, barely present. Vanessa's mom kept trying to engage me in conversation, and I gave short responses. Her dad asked if I was feeling okay. I said I was just tired. Vanessa was overcompensating, being extra cheerful and talkative, which made the contrast more obvious. Caroline pulled Vanessa aside at one point, and I saw them talking in the kitchen, glancing at me. I assumed Vanessa was making excuses for my behavior. By early afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I said I needed to go for a walk, get some air. Vanessa followed me to the door and whispered that I was being obvious, that everyone knew something was wrong. I said maybe that's because something was wrong. She said I was ruining Christmas. I left. I walked around her neighborhood for over an hour. When I came back, the atmosphere was even more tense. Vanessa had clearly said something to her family because everyone was being overly polite to me in that careful way people do when they know something's wrong but don't want to acknowledge it. We had Christmas dinner. It was painful. Everyone was trying to keep conversation light, but it felt forced. After dinner, Vanessa's dad suggested we go for a walk. Just the two of us. He asked me directly what was going on. I didn't know what to say. Vanessa hadn't want to tell them yet, but I also couldn't keep up the pretense. I told him Vanessa had given me divorce papers that morning. He looked shocked. He asked if I was serious. I said completely serious, that she'd filed over a week ago. He went back inside, and within minutes the whole family knew. Vanessa was furious. She said I deliberately ruined their Christmas, that I couldn't have just kept quiet for one day. Her mom was crying. Caroline was comforting her. The rest of the evening was a disaster. Vanessa's family left the next morning, December 26th, earlier than planned. Her mom was cold to me. Caroline wouldn't make eye contact. Her dad tried to be diplomatic, but it was clear he was disappointed. After they left, Vanessa unleashed. She said I'd humiliated her in front of her family, that I made her look like the villain by telling her dad about the divorce when she'd asked me to wait. She said I'd been cold and distant all day, that I'd made Christmas unbearable, that her family's last memory of us together would be this awful day. I said she'd created this situation by serving me divorce papers on Christmas in the first place, by inviting her family to stay with us while planning to end our marriage. She said the filing date was out of her control, that the legal timeline forced her hand, that she'd had no choice about when to serve me. I said she'd had plenty of choices, and she'd made all the wrong ones. The past few days have been horrible. We're avoiding each other completely. I'm sleeping in the guest room, barely speaking. Vanessa has been texting with her family constantly. I've gotten messages from Caroline saying I'm selfish and cruel for ruining Christmas. Her mom sent a long text about how disappointed she is in me, how she thought I was better than this. I talked to my own family. My brother says Vanessa ambushed me, and I had every right to not pretend. My mom thinks I should have waited to tell Vanessa's dad, that I could have gotten through one day. My best friend thinks the whole situation was impossible, and there was no right answer. I keep replaying Christmas morning, wondering if I should have just sucked it up and pretended for a day. Maybe I could have made it through if I tried harder. Maybe telling her dad was the wrong move. But another part of me thinks Vanessa created an impossible situation. She filed for divorce, invited her family to stay with us, then served me on Christmas morning and expected me to perform like nothing was wrong. Am I wrong for not being able to pretend everything was fine? Did I ruin Christmas by being unable to hide my reaction to being served divorce papers? Or was Vanessa wrong to put me in this situation in the first place? Update 6 weeks later. I'm updating because the situation has developed in ways I didn't anticipate, and I need perspective. After my original post in late December, I spent the first few weeks of January trying to process everything. Vanessa and I were still living in the same condo, but completely avoiding each other. I was sleeping in the guest room. We leave for work at different times to avoid running into each other in the morning. It was unsustainable. Early January, I hired a divorce attorney. My lawyer reviewed the papers Vanessa had filed and explained the process. Vanessa had cited irreconcilable differences. She wasn't asking for spousal support, given that we both have good incomes. The main issues would be dividing assets, primarily the condo, and our investment accounts. January 10th, my lawyer sent Vanessa's lawyer a response. We agreed to mediation rather than litigation, which would be faster and less expensive. Our first mediation session was scheduled for January 24th. In the meantime, Vanessa was still in contact with her family. Her sister Caroline had apparently told their extended family what happened, positioning it as me being cruel and ruining Christmas. I started getting messages from Vanessa's aunt and cousin, people I'd known for years, telling me I'd handled things badly. What bothered me most was that everyone seemed to focus on my behavior on Christmas Day, not on the fact that Vanessa had served me divorce papers on Christmas morning in the first place. It was like the actual divorce was secondary to me not being able to pretend everything was fine. January 15th, I had a conversation with Vanessa, one of the few times we'd spoken directly since Christmas. I asked her why she'd really invited her family if she'd already filed. She said she'd filed on December 17th before thinking through the timeline implications. By the time she realized the service deadline would fall during their visit, it was too late to uninvite them without explaining why. She said she'd hoped maybe she could serve me right after they left on the 27th, but her lawyer had insisted she couldn't wait that long. So she'd chosen Christmas morning as the least disruptive time, when she could tell me privately before everyone woke up. I asked if she'd told her family the actual timeline, that she'd filed before inviting them. She said she'd told them we'd been having problems for a while and that the divorce was mutual. When I pointed out that serving someone divorce papers on Christmas wasn't exactly mutual, she got defensive. That conversation made me realize Vanessa had controlled the narrative with her family from the start. She'd framed everything as me being unable to handle the situation maturely, without giving them context about the state of our marriage for the past year or the actual timeline of events. Late January, something happened that shifted things. I ran into Vanessa's dad at a coffee shop near our condo. It was awkward at first. He clearly didn't expect to see me. We ended up talking for about 30 minutes. He apologized for how he'd acted on Christmas, said he'd been shocked and didn't know how to react. He asked me directly what had happened to our marriage. I gave him the honest version, how Vanessa had become increasingly distant over the past year, how she'd refused to really engage in counseling, how she'd filed for divorce on December 17th and then invited the family to stay, knowing she'd have to serve me during their visit. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said he'd noticed Vanessa had been different lately, more closed off, but he'd attributed it to work stress. He said she'd told the family that I'd been the one pulling away, that I'd been unsupportive. I was stunned. That was completely opposite of reality. I've been the one trying to have conversations, suggesting counseling, asking what we needed to do to fix things. He looked uncomfortable, said he didn't know what to believe anymore, but that the timeline I'd given him made more sense than what Vanessa had said. Our first mediation session on January 24th was tense, but productive. We agreed on the basic framework for dividing assets. The condo would be sold, and we'd split the proceeds. Investment accounts would be divided based on what each of us had contributed during the marriage. We'd each keep our own retirement accounts and vehicles. The mediator asked about the timeline of separation. Vanessa confirmed she'd filed December 17th. The mediator asked if there was a specific reason for filing, which she did given that the holidays were approaching. Vanessa gave a vague answer about it being the right time for her emotionally. The mediator looked somewhat skeptical, but moved on. We scheduled a second session for February 14th to finalize details. Last week, February 4th, I got a call from Caroline, Vanessa's sister. She said she'd talked to their dad about his conversation with me. She said she was starting to understand that maybe things weren't as simple as Vanessa had made them seem. She didn't apologize for the text she'd sent in December, but her tone was different, less accusatory, more uncertain. She asked if Vanessa had really been as distant as I described. I said she had been, that I'd been dealing with it for over a year. Caroline said Vanessa had painted a picture of me being emotionally unavailable and checked out, that she told the family I'd refused to work on the marriage. I asked if Vanessa had mentioned that I'd been the one who suggested counseling, and she'd quit after 3 sessions. Caroline went quiet, said no, Vanessa hadn't mentioned that. Yesterday, February 9th, Vanessa texted me asking if I'd been talking to her family about her marriage. I said I'd run into her dad and we talked. She accused me of trying to turn her family against her. I said I'd just been honest when her dad asked me what happened. She said I had no right to discuss our private marriage issues with her family. I pointed out that she'd been discussing our marriage with them for months, framing everything to make me look like the bad guy. She said that was different. They were her family. I told her I wasn't going to lie or stay silent, just because the truth made her uncomfortable. She said I was being vindictive. I said I was being honest. We haven't spoken since. Our second mediation session is this Friday, February 14th, Valentine's Day, which feels grimly appropriate. I'm hoping we can finalize everything and move forward. The condo is going on the market next week. I've started looking at apartments, ready to be out of this shared space. Vanessa is apparently planning to move back to her hometown, closer to her family, which is fine with me. Looking back, I don't regret telling her dad on Christmas. I couldn't have maintained that pretense. Vanessa created an impossible situation and then blamed me when I couldn't handle it the way she wanted. Her family is starting to see the full picture, not just the version she gave them. I don't need them to take my side, but I'm glad they're at least getting some context. Final update, 6 weeks later. This is my final update. The divorce is finalized and I'm moving forward. After my last update in mid-February, things progressed relatively quickly. Our second mediation session on February 14th went smoothly. We finalized the asset division, agreed on timeline for selling the condo, signed off on all the necessary paperwork. The mediator said we could have the divorce finalized within a few weeks, assuming no complications. Vanessa and I barely spoke during the session. We communicated through our lawyers for most of it. When it was over, we left separately. That was the last time I saw her in person. Late February, the condo went on the market. We'd agreed to stage it and handle showings separately. I'd schedule mine for weekday evenings. Vanessa would do weekends. We got an offer within a week, slightly below asking price, but reasonable. We accepted it. Closing was scheduled for March 20th. Early March, I signed a lease on a one-bedroom apartment about 3 miles from our old place, still in Chicago. Close to work, smaller, but perfect for just me. I moved most of my stuff there over the first 2 weeks of March before the condo closed. Vanessa had apparently already found a place back in her hometown. The divorce was finalized March 8th. We didn't have to appear in court together. Our lawyers handled everything. I got the notification by email after 6.5 years of marriage, ended with a PDF attachment. Around that same time, I had another conversation with Vanessa's dad. He called me on March 10th, said he wanted to talk. We met for coffee again. He told me he'd had a long conversation with Vanessa about everything that had happened. She'd finally been more open with him about how unhappy she'd been in the marriage, how she'd felt disconnected but hadn't known how to address it. He said he understood better now why she'd pulled away, but he also acknowledged that the Christmas situation had been handled badly. He said Vanessa had admitted she'd been wrong to expect me to pretend everything was fine on Christmas Day, that she'd put me in an impossible position. He apologized for how he and the family had reacted initially, said they'd only heard one side and had jumped to conclusions. I appreciated that, told him I understood. He said he hoped there were no hard feelings, that he'd always liked me and wished things had turned out differently. We parted on good terms. Caroline also reached out. March 12th, she sent a long text apologizing for the messages she'd sent back in December, said she'd been protective of Vanessa and hadn't understood the full situation. She said she talked to Vanessa recently and realized the marriage had been struggling for a long time, that it wasn't as simple as one person being at fault. I responded that I appreciated the apology, that I understood she'd been supporting her sister, that I didn't hold it against her. She said she hoped I'd find happiness. I said the same to Vanessa. March 20th, the condo officially closed. We each got our portion of the proceeds, enough for a solid down payment on something else when I'm ready. For now, I'm renting and rebuilding. The past few weeks I've been settling into my new apartment. It's strange living alone after being with someone for so long, but also freeing. I can make decisions without negotiating. I can arrange things how I want. I don't have to navigate around tension and resentment. Work has been busy, which helps. I've been taking on new projects, staying late when I need to. My manager knows about the divorce and has been understanding. I've also started running again, something I used to do regularly, but had stopped over the past few years. There's a good path along the lake near my new place. I've been going most mornings before work. It's been good for clearing my head. I reconnected with some friends I'd lost touch with during the marriage, grabbed drinks with my college roommate last week, had dinner with a couple from our old friend group who'd always been more my friends than ours, building back my social life outside of being half of a couple. Last week, March 18th, I got a text from Vanessa, first direct communication since the mediation. She said she'd been doing some reflecting, that she wanted to apologize for how she'd handled Christmas. She acknowledged that serving me on Christmas morning and then expecting me to pretend everything was normal had been unfair. She said she'd been so focused on wanting one last good holiday that she hadn't thought through how it would actually feel from my perspective. She said she'd been selfish and she was sorry. I appreciated the apology, texted back that I accepted it, that I hoped she was doing okay. She said that moving back home had been good for her, that she was working on herself. I said I was glad. That was it, brief, civil, final, the way it should have been months ago. Looking back on Christmas, I still don't think I could have handled it differently. Vanessa put me in a situation where there was no good option. Pretending would have been dishonest and exhausting. Being authentic about my feelings meant ruining the holiday. I don't blame her family for their initial reaction. They saw me being cold on Christmas without understanding why. Once they got the full context, most of them came around. That's all I can ask for. The marriage ended because we'd stopped being partners long before Christmas. Vanessa had checked out emotionally, and I'd been trying to force something that was already over. The divorce papers on Christmas morning were just the official acknowledgement of what had been true for months. I'm 35, divorced, starting over. It's not where I thought I'd be, but I'm okay with it. Better to be alone than in a marriage where both people are miserable. I don't know what's next. Eventually I'll date again. Maybe for now I'm focusing on myself, my apartment, my job, my friends, my running routine, building a life that feels authentic instead of performing one that looks right. Christmas morning forced a reckoning that was probably overdue. It was brutal and messy and handled badly by both of us, but it ended something that needed to end. I'm okay with that.